Okay, good morning, everyone. Looks like we have pretty much a quorum this morning, so I'm going to get started. Thanks for joining us again. Next slide, Rick. Usual reminders, please don't use any private health information during your case presentations in particular. Here's some of our usual reminders about assistance and contact information. Next slide. And some background information about cardio, which you've seen before. Next slide, please. So today we have an interesting presentation by Adam on wearable devices. Some really interesting cases from Nathaniel and Melissa that I'm looking forward to hearing from as well. And we'll, Chris and Jim and I will try our best to chime in if we have time. It's actually kind of encouraging that we're running out of time with our case discussions, because I think it means everyone's engaged. These are our disclosure statements, nothing new that I'm aware of. And Adam, with that introduction, please take it away.
Awesome, thanks, Gautam. I'd like to start just really briefly today, if you could unmute your camera, if that's possible. I'd be super great. Chris already knows. And show me your hands. Just want to see, put them up. Come on, Jackson, get them up. Okay, so we're running maybe 50% today, which I think is actually probably a little bit low in terms of when I've done this. So 50% of you have an obvious wearable. Some of you might have one hidden under your shirt or on your ankle. Those are a little less common, but wearables are everywhere. We use them for all kinds of stuff. One of my former mentors wrote this book on and a few papers on self-care. And one of the things that his name is Carrie Carr. One of the things that Carrie used to say was that the vast majority of healthcare that people receive in their lifetime is care that they provide to themselves, right? Very little of the care that you get in your lifetime do you get from someone else. The vast majority of it is care that you provide to yourselves. And wearables are this awesome way of facilitating self-care with data and sort of using evidence-based self-care on yourself sometimes. So with that, let's keep going. So my objectives here are to show you some ways we can use wearables to monitor cardiovascular risk, talk about a bunch of devices, and show you a little bit about how wearable data might be used in regular care, or at least get you thinking about that. So we already know from my brief demo just now that many people love wearables, but it's almost 500 million wearables were bought in 2022 alone. This dwarfs the number of sort of clinical medical devices. At the bottom there, you can see I have home blood pressure cuffs, pulse oximeters, and glucose meters. There are way fewer of those than there are people buying wearables. The other interesting thing here, though, is we tend to think of these sports, smartwatch or a wristband as a dominant form of wearable. But actually, there are tons of other types, like head-mounted clothing, and ear-worn wearables are increasingly common. Ear-worn here is sort of a bucket that includes a whole bunch of stuff. Not all 156 million of those ear-worn wearables will take your heart rate, but some of them will. There are tons of different types of wearables. If those of you have them, maybe you've shopped, and so they run from about $50 to about $1,400. And the way that you pay for them has also recently changed drastically. The primary, does anybody have a Whoop band that they want to put up and show? No hardcore fitness enthusiasts in this group. So Whoop is this totally interesting company that is far more focused on the data than they are on the wearable product itself. And so what Whoop does is they charge a monthly subscription fee, because they take your data and they dump it into the cloud and they run a bunch of machine learning algorithms on it, and they use your personal data along with the data of their other customers to make personalized fitness enhancing recommendations to you. So that, and increasingly, so they went from nothing to the stratosphere as a company because people really, as it turns out, like that. And they like that type of interpretive information about their health, and there's a lot they value it, and they're also willing to pay lots and lots of money for it. And so if you can imagine, like, having a subscription is also way healthier for a company than selling a gadget that gets thrown in the trash 90 days later. So in terms of the things that these things do, this is a partial list, but these are the ones that are probably most relevant to cardiovascular health. So heart rate monitoring, blood pressure tracking, sleep actigraphy, EKG, calorie expenditure tracking, activity monitoring. This one we can't really emphasize enough. The sophistication of the gyroscope plus location monitoring in most smart devices is really totally mind-numbing. In terms of being able to tell how many flights of stairs you went up and down, or how many stairs you went up and down, how much altitude you gained or lost in a day, the value of that information is kind of shocking. Also, what speed you went up and down those stairs. Like, you can get a personalized report from some of the devices at your average speed for walking stairs. Your blood oxygen, your EVO2 max, route mapping, and blood glucose monitoring, and body composition measurement. So the last one there is the main one in the device that I have currently 3 funded projects working on, where so that we tend to think of that as total body fat percentage. The device we're testing also measures your body's level of hydration by measuring your total body water, intracellular and extracellular water. We can do that every hour. And the possibilities of these things just keep growing. I didn't put body temperature on there, but that is another one that is often in lots of these. In terms of the sensors, like the technology, I'm not going to give a bunch of detail on this, but they really fall in these categories. So they're motion-based, so accelerometer and gyroscope, microphones, optical, bioelectrical, chemical. And microphone is one of those that's interesting because it's used for like sleep monitoring too. There are also potentially limitless wireless accessory bands and devices that you can, like, so once the thing has Bluetooth in it, we can stick anything else we want on any other part of you and monitor that. This is my device, or at least the old one. We're building a new one. So it's codenamed Drink, the device that recognizes your need to intake water, which is the best code name for a device ever. So we have a clinical trial that's just about to launch, with the idea is that the device improves recovery after acute care for dehydration. So we're putting it on a bunch of older adults who show up in the emergency room with syncope and diagnosis of dehydration. We monitor them in the clinical decision unit. We train them on how to use it. We send them home, and we randomize them to getting the information on the smartphone that the device provides. So either we just monitor them, or we tell them all day long whether they have enough water. Negative health events and lessen the burden of their acute kidney injury from their dehydration. This stuff, actually, I put this as coming soon. That's an older picture. There was actually a trial of one of these that was just published last week. So there are implantables. So there's like a $20 million study with the bioengineers at Case Western called Cosmic, where instead of putting it on you, they're just going to do a little surgery and put it in your abdomen, and their device does pretty much everything I had in that list. They just put it inside you, one device, and it sends all of that information to your phone. And then the tattoo and skin printed one is one that there was a trial of last week. I didn't update the slide. These can last like sometimes 30 days, sometimes 90 days, but they literally print the electronic circuit onto the surface of your skin and use that as the electronic device. The power source for these tends to vary quite a bit, but they do work and they're kind of amazing. And you should look to, like, we're going to see way more of this type of device in the next decade. So the biggest question everybody wants to know is, does any of this work? And so the best answer is like maybe. So sensor accuracy is generally worse than a clinical device. So like think of like SpO2, blood pressure, EKG, like anything that you've heard of, if you put it on your wrist, it probably works considerably worse. However, some things are quite good. So but it isn't something where we can make a broad generalization about how accurate they are, because some things are honestly breathtakingly amazing. And some of them incorporate data that doesn't exist in the standard clinical devices either, which I'll talk about later. Most of the RCTs have modest sample sizes. We have tons of qualitative and mixed method studies, and the data from those is really important because they tend to show that the people who use wearables really value the data and information that they provide, and that they rarely struggle to integrate them into their lives. That some of those studies show a relatively high abandon rate when the user experience of the software isn't good. And this is a sort of old adage from computer science, which is that software sucks. So if the app is no good, then the wearable can do whatever it wants. But if the app is no good, then and the experience is no good, then nobody's going to use it, and it's not going to have any benefit. I'm sure some of you have seen this even with your clinical devices like blood glucose monitors, whatever it is. If the app is no good, it can be very, very frustrating experience for you and for your. The other thing is that the recent trend in data is that not only did the pandemic make us less active as human beings, but it made us far more likely to use. So there was a huge surge in the use of wearables since 2020, since the pandemic. So people are both more sedentary and both more conscious of it and trying to use wearables to get themselves to move around, which is totally fascinating. And related to that, the other thing, and I didn't have this on the list, but I wanted to talk about it, because the other thing that these things do that doesn't seem like a super interesting technological achievement is just remind you to do stuff, right? Like, so all of you who showed me your devices, how many times a day do you actually get up and move or breathe or do something extra because that thing on your wrist told you to do it? Karen's nodding. A couple of you are saying, yeah, this is Nathaniel, Melissa. Yeah, honestly, it's actually pretty great, right? Like I would say when I wear mine, which I don't wear very often, like if it tells me to get up, I probably ignore that like 8 times out of 10. But those 2 times I did get up and move. And then if it tells me to take a deep breath or do something like that, I probably ignore that like 8 times out of 10, but still it's 2 times a day that I did like stop and pause and take a breath. So that reminding function can be really, really powerful for some individuals, obviously less powerful for others like me. But I think that reminding function is one, like you have it on you. It's like a little personal assistant that is part of your body for the day. So the best, really my favorite review study is this one. And what they said is like, toss a coin if you want to know whether these things are going to work. And so that is not a helpful piece of information to us at all. What we really need to do is look at what actually seems to work and in what scenarios. This is where it does actually get sort of interesting. So the Nike Fuel Band study, this W-STEP RCT, is totally fascinating study. So they gave this to people who have peripheral vascular disease with a relatively rigorous sort of social cognitive component. And these folks walked further and they all rated their quality of life better after using the device. The other thing is these combo or hybrid studies where you combine the wearable with some sort of counseling seem to be the ones that have like a little extra push or extra benefit, so that it's not just the wearable, it's also like the services and the counseling and the physical activity, all the other structures that you surround it with. And the study that shows like, well, if you give somebody a wearable and just give everybody a wearable and randomize them to setting activity goals, just that one little step of setting an activity goal plus the wearable has a benefit. And then this last study is like super intensive on sleep. And so they give you a weekly class plus a telephone coach plus a wearable versus there's like all these different arms in this study. And this one actually found like people sleep better and their blood pressure goes down, which is totally great. And the improvement in blood pressure in this one was actually also notable, like similar to what you had achieved by adding a medicine. But in the context of all of that, what my main takeaway from this whole talk is that I think the way that we're going right now is probably the most interesting. When I mentioned the Whoop band, which is that the data on the devices and the data that we have on people is increasing. We're increasingly figuring out how to create value from that for people themselves and for healthcare providers. This particular study from a group at UCSD is just a work of scientific beauty. And so what they do is they take really a very small number of indicators. It looks like only 6 or 8 observed pieces of data, and they use a series of machine learning models to make predictions about how, if somebody changed their activity, their blood pressure would improve. And so their proof of concept study, this is some of the data. So for a single person, so this is just one person's data in their study, where they show the average information, and then they give this recommendation based upon the random forest machine learning model that they used, only based on their data. There's no training data from another person. This is a N of 1 study. And so what they said was that daily average walking and running speed, if they increase their walking or running speed, it's going to influence their blood pressure. So what they noticed using the device over this period of, I think it was 4 months. So in a 4-month window, what they noticed is that for this person, the more often that they walked or ran faster, the lower their blood pressure was for the 48 to 72 hours after that. So they made a personalized recommendation. And then the follow-up from this study is that among this person who took that recommendation, that actually became true, right? So they increased their walking and running speed, and then their blood pressure was also lower. So this approach to personalization is where all the stuff is going to go, and it's completely amazing because you're going to be able to really say, like, instead of just like generalizing from mean improvements in RCTs, we're going to be able to generalize from improvements in you and whether something actually worked for you based upon data that we collect. Another question that people have often asked is about wearable data at the point of care. And these quotes are kind of great. Most doctors have little time for or interest in using wellness data collected by wearables. They don't want to spend money on additional systems, and most of all, they don't want to worry about keeping the data private. Doctors would love to be excited about wearables. They're gadget guys at heart, but their day-to-day is spent battling 30-year-old fax machines to get your latest lab report. So I love these 2 quotes. However, even in the context of that, what we know is that the Epic Corporation, many institutions, a handful of institutions now have turned on a feature from Epic that allows you to integrate your wearable data with your MyChart account and share everything on it with your doctor. So right now at where I work at Metro Health, you can do this. You can just go to the link and you can connect to your device. It's basically if you have a Samsung device, an Apple device, a Google device, and there's maybe one other. Fitbit is the other one. Then you can load all of your data into the EHR. As of today, we have 32 patients at Metro Health who have shared their wearable data with us, so it's not a big number. But the thing that you need to understand here is we get their heart rate every hour of every day, right? And they've all been in there since about September. So we know the heart rate every hour of every day for 32 of our patients since September. In addition, we know their step count. We know how many hours they sleep if they wear it at night. So we have this sort of like unending stream of data into the EHR together with everything else. So this should give you a view of like where personalization is going to go with these wearables, and might help you imagine how you could use them in your own practice, and certainly might help you think about it differently when you talk about it with patients or you see it on their wrist when they come in the clinic. So in summary, it's really unlikely that any of these things are going to harm your patients. Abandon rates are high. People give up on them and throw them away relatively quickly, especially in populations who have low digital literacy. So if people aren't used to using a smartphone or a device, they actually have a pretty high abandon rate of it. And then we also know that some wearables, when you combine them with other stuff, particularly counseling, they can be very effective. And if you make personalized recommendations with devices, we know that that can have tremendous benefits for primary and secondary cardiovascular prevention. And that's it, and I'm all done, and I really am excited to hear the cases today. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Adam. I'm going to throw it open for questions. I had a question for you when you told us that there were 32 patients whose data is being uploaded to Epic. Are physicians reviewing that data, doing anything with it?
Yes, so we have a small team of clinical informaticists, not their own clinicians, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like we turned it on, and now we're just trying to figure out, like, who are these people and what is going on with the data that they're sending us. So we have a small team of people who are looking at it. Because we don't even understand it. In fact, the device could upload the heart rate every 5 minutes, but we're not willing to take that. Like, it would break Metro Health, right? Like, if we had 10,000 patients giving us heart rate data every we don't have the server capacity for all of the wearable data that our patients could send us. So there are some constraints on it, but in general, the data currently is not being used. I think that the team at the hospital right now is trying to figure out, how are we going to deal with this? What does it look like? How is it even useful? So there are a couple of new projects where we're working on that. The view of the data, and I was hoping to grab a screenshot for you all today. The view of the data for clinicians in the record is actually kind of good. The data visualization from the vendors in the EHR, like, you would be happy with it. It's as good as anything else you see data on in the EHR, maybe better. I would say from that standpoint, it could be very, very useful in a clinical consultation if you had a patient's if they wore it, they told you they wore it, and you had a view of their physical activity level at a virtual visit, even that could be very, very useful.
Okay, thanks. Any additional questions for Adam before we move to our cases? Back to Claire for a moment.
Sure. So very quickly, just a reminder that the cardio webinar is in 3 weeks. Rick, next slide, please. You could register using this QR code, or on our website has a registration link. I do have a flyer if you are interested in sharing with your networks. We would appreciate any and all outreach. Next slide, Rick. A post-clinic survey should be in your inbox. Please fill that out. It's very short. It just gives us feedback on Adam's presentation today. We do need case studies. So if you are missing your case studies, I have reached out to you in the chat today. If you need your links again, let me know. And then we need about 3 or 4 more in addition. So if you're interested in presenting an additional case, let me know, and I can send you a third link for your case. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.